Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. Now, as we continue to watch what is happening on the ground and obviously in the air as well, Russia is transitioning to more of an air component to this ongoing campaign. Now, a lot of people are looking at what is happening on the ground, and they're asking themselves, is this the large Russian summer offensive that we are now witnessing by Russian forces? And to answer that, the question is, or the answer to that is essentially yes. But not from the standpoint necessarily of ground operations. Look, the Russians, as we speak, are launching up to 500 to 1,000 missile, drone, and guided bomb strikes against Ukrainian forces per day right now. 500 to 1,000. It's just not targets that the Russians are hitting in large cities such as Kiev and Kharkov, but the Russians are also targeting dozens of frontline units every single day of this conflict. The largest component of this quote-unquote summer offensive is actually coming from the air by the Russians. Now, that's not to say the Russians are also launching ground operations as well in tandem with these air operations that are ongoing. If we start down here in the kind of the southern sector of the conflict near Pokrovsk, you can see that an envelopment is occurring. Right now, the Russians are in the preparatory phase of completely encircling Pokrovsk. The Russians are looking to cut off the two main routes into the city, the E50 and then this highway just to the north. There's a roadway just to the north that runs into Rodnitsky, this area here. And this town to the north of Pokrovsk appears to be the Russian objective. Now, what the Russians are also doing is negating the ability of Ukrainian forces to supply a core level element of its armed forces that are defending Pokrovsk. Now, if this encirclement is complete, an entire corps of the Ukrainian military, 30,000 troops, will be enveloped by Russian forces. Now, that is just not the only sector we are seeing these envelopment operations taking place. You're seeing it all across the line of contact. You see this developing salient to the north, the town of Kupiansk, the fortified town of Kupiansk. Right now, Russian forces are just about 4 kilometers outside the town. Now, are the Russians going to assault Kupiansk? Probably not. Probably not. They are going to envelop, cut it off, deny supplies, and then win this war through attrition. And again, another salient that is developing around Kupiansk. And this is the Russian strategy. Not only that, we've seen a buildup of Russian forces in areas such as the Sumy sector, the Kharkov sector. This is continuing. Now, we're not seeing large sections of territory being taken by the Russians. But what we are seeing is the Russians starting to set things up, especially in terms of its air campaign, to kill a lot of these Ukrainian units along the front lines in conjunction with these envelopment operations that are ongoing. Now, what's interesting is there was just a recent phone call within the last few days between President Trump and President Putin. And reportedly during that conversation, President Putin basically told President Trump that the war was going to continue and that Russia was going to fight this war until victory. Now, I have this sneaky suspicion that it was also discussed about the current supply efforts by the United States supplying the Ukrainian military. And I have the suspicion that President Putin explained to President Trump, hey, look, this war can end. We are going to win this war militarily one way or another. You can expend large amounts of treasure. You can expend large amounts of weapons helping the Ukrainians, and that's fine. You can do that. We won't like it. We won't be happy about it, but the war is going to continue until victory. You may prolong the war, but that is going to cost you. It's going to cost you a lot of money. It's also going to cost a lot of fatalities and a lot of casualties, essentially on both sides. Or you can stop the supply of weapon systems to the Ukrainians, and this ends much sooner. This is a cost versus benefit situation. Okay? No matter where you stand on which side, well, obviously, I mean, if you stand on the side of the Ukrainians, this is a hard pill to swallow. But it shouldn't be. And the reason it shouldn't be is because ultimately the Ukrainians are going to lose. There are some people who believe the Ukrainians will continue to fight and somehow win at some point. But that's not, unfortunately, it's not going to happen for the Ukrainians. It's not going to happen. So again, from a cost versus benefit standpoint from the United States, okay? The United States continues to support the war effort. We spend billions upon billions upon billions more dollars, and at the same time, we continue to see the loss of lives. Lots of lives lost. Billions of dollars expended and many more dead. For what? Ultimately a Russian victory, which is going to happen. Option two. Reduce the cost of the conflict. Do not lose billions upon billions upon billions of dollars and quite possibly save tens of thousands of lives by a more expedient defeat of Ukrainian/NATO forces. And those are the two options. Those are the two options at hand right now in terms of this conflict. And the Russians get it. Again, you look at the amount of airstrikes that are ongoing by the Russians against Ukrainian targets all over the Ukraine. Thousands of aim points being struck every week. And this mechanism of air attack is only growing. It is getting bigger. It is getting bigger each day. Remember, look, early in the campaign, we saw dozens of strikes by the Russians in terms of the use of drones. We have seen that expand from dozens to now hundreds and hundreds, and all probably will turn into thousands of strikes per day. And this is that war of attrition, this wearing out of the adversary that Russia is committed to right now. And again, I have a feeling that after that conversation, Putin was essentially, look, Trump, you have two options here. One, continue to fund Ukraine, and you lose a lot of money, a lot of lives are lost, and ultimately we are going to fight this until it's over. Or two, you don't lose billions of dollars, and we have an earlier victory, and this is all done with. All roads lead to the same place, okay? All the roads, the two roads, lead to the same place. One is longer and much more arduous. The other is shorter and quicker. Now, it is going to be painful for the Ukrainian military in some of these sectors, especially in some of these envelopment operations that are ongoing, such as the areas near Pokrovsk. Again, we see a multitude of Ukrainian corps, Ukrainian brigade combat sets, multiple Ukrainian brigade combat sets, battalion tactical groups, battalion set groups that are being surrounded by Russian forces. And this is not going to stop. It is not going to stop. The Russians have entered what is essentially a drone war economy. The Russian both tactical situation and strategic situation right now is focused on this new idea of large-scale drone campaigns. Both small drones and strategic long-range drones as well. And then obviously missile and guided bomb attacks. And the Ukrainians simply don't have that kind of capability to continue this type of war. The Russian economy is vastly larger, and it is directly being supported by third parties such as China, North Korea, and other nation states as well. Look, the Ukrainians just don't have their own benefactors. The Russian Federation does as well in terms of support. And that is why we will continue to see the war continue until ultimately the Russians are victorious. And again, the Russians, in terms of the Russian perception of what could happen versus what has happened, they are not going to stop. This was the line in the sand for Russia, the Ukraine. And unfortunately, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the EU crossed it with its attempt to assimilate the Ukraine. And that is why we're watching what is happening now. So as always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. Good day.